Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy. The Russell Cosmogony by Walter Russell, SC.D. and Lau Russell. A home study course for the transformation of man. Unit 11, Lessons 41, 42, 43, 44. Copyrighted 1951 by Walter and Lau Russell. No part of this manuscript can be printed in any form without permission from the author, except by a reviewer who may quote brief passages in a review to be printed in a magazine or newspaper. Issued by the Walter Russell Foundation, Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy by Walter Russell, SC.D. and Lau Russell. Lesson number 41. The Walter Russell Foundation, Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. Copyrighted 1951 by Walter and Lau Russell. Prelude. The goal of man is cosmic conscious self-awareness, which is God-awareness. The mass of mankind is still barbaric. He is still body-sense-body which lives and dies. He is slave to life, then to death, for life and death are real to him. Man must forever be transformed by the renewing of his mind until mind transcends body instead of body transcending mind. The very few transcendent ones among men who are far in their unfolding and have become strong with God-awareness, they alone are free. These have risen above their sensing. These have conquered both life and death through their knowing. The life-death journey from body sensing to mind knowing is a long journey of countless millions of seeming repetitions. He who has begun to know that these seeming life-death sequences are not repetitions or reincarnations and are but one eternally long and continuous unfolding of one eternal idea from one point in the eternal light of mind, has gone far toward his cosmic conscious goal. 687. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 688. He who can withdraw from the extensions of his sensing into the fulcrum of his knowing, from which those extensions spring and extend and retract them under full control of his will, becomes co-creator with the Universal One. He is the transcendent being who has become the fulcrum of his own power. You who are reading these lines with intense interest would not have read 10 pages of these many hundreds if you were not one of those few of the human race who have far transcended the early stages of physical man. It is to you that this light of new knowledge is directed, in order that you may see and comprehend this universe of matter and motion for what it is, instead of being deceived by its illusions, that these descriptions of God's ways and God's processes are directed. When you fully understand that what we call matter and motion are but electric thought recordings of all mind thinking, your thinking as well as God's thinking, your power to control matter and motion as its creator instead of as its slave, will multiply in the measure of your comprehension of the electric wave which records all thinking. We have taken the essential first steps which were necessary to bring you to the stage where you could comprehend the wave which manufactures spheres of matter in cubic wave fields. We have described the effect of desire to give as an outward extension, or explosion, and to re-give as an inner one. We have stated that every action of giving is simultaneously balanced by an equal re-giving, and that each action-reaction is repeated in reverse. See Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 68. See figures 74 to 84 on pages 660 to 665. Reincarnation is impossible to comprehend without understanding this simultaneity of action and reaction followed sequentially by the reverse of action and reaction. Reread and study The Law of Conservation as newly written at bottom of page 183. Then saturate yourself with the majestic idea that what you are now doing with your positive body is simultaneously being recorded in pattern in your negative body for 1 full week. Make this idea a part of your thinking by meditating upon it and thinking out hundreds of examples of its workings until you know it in your soul. When you fully realize that you are continually recording yourself eternally, and that the visible half of you eternally interchanges with the invisible half, and that you build both of them together eternally for eternal interchange, you will then know that there is naught but life in this unfolding refolding universe, and that death is the other balanced half of life, just as it is impossible to polarize one end of a bar magnet without polarizing the other end simultaneously. It is likewise impossible to perform any action with your physical body without recording that action simultaneously in your invisible counterpart. Also, that which you record in the invisible part of you is as certain to become a visible body of you again, as that the pendulum which is now swinging to the right will reverse itself and swing the other way. Do you not see that you are thus recording memories of experiences over thousands of lives which accumulate for repetition and addition forever? Every universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 690. Cell of your body remembers these experiences and desires to repeat them. It cannot evade repeating them. They are permanently recorded in the wave as patterned forms which are permanently kept in the recording system of God's universe. We will tell you in the next unit of the inert gases which are the seed of all forms, and of all states of motion which ever have been. We will tell you about them in the next unit. The musician remembers his music. His desire for musical expression is registered in his negative body as he manifests it physically, in his positive body. His love for music will begin to demand expression, and he will undoubtedly continue from where he left off before, just as an apple again appears on a limb, as it did last year. The beaver builds his dam because he remembers how he built it over thousands upon thousands of continued repetitions. Every thought and action are permanently recorded as every form unfolds from its seed. It is simultaneously being refolded into its seed. The positive cannot unfold into form without the pattern which is projected through the negative. We have explained that this is a radial universe because extensions of desire from points of desire in space can result only in a radial universe, and that the retractions of ray givings toward those same centers compels it to become a two-way reciprocating universe, in which gravitation and radiation interchange to compress spheres of light from dark space and to dissolve them again for reforming. You will recall that this is God's method of dividing the darkness from universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 691. The light to manifest the concentration and decentration pulsations of his electric thinking. Thus the polarized universe of pairs of opposite conditions of every creating effect comes into being in wave fields which constitute the heartbeat of this electric thought wave universe. It now becomes necessary to climax all that has before been written by describing how the invisible cubes of space and their planes of zero curvature come into being to bound wave fields and insulate them from each other. Within each cube wave field of zero curvature is a curved universe, a curved radial universe of motion. Curvature ceases where motion ceases at every cube plane of zero curvature. All motion comes to rest at every plane of zero curvature to reverse its polarity and its direction of motion. All motion is curved and all curvature is spiral. These are the things you must know to complete your comprehension of God's methods of bodybuilding, which are also your methods. Also you must know the cause of spiral curvature and the principles which control the motions of planets in their orbits, and you must know of the mirrors and lenses of light which God makes use of to construct his wave-field universe of divided light, and the gyroscopic principle which creates a dynamic universe of spheres which revolve and rotate until their equators are 90 degrees to their wave axes, and their poles of rotation are parallel to them. When you are fully aware of the workings of God's electric thinking processes, and of the 8 forward and reverse gears which constitute every universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 692, octave wave in every effect of motion, you will then find the answer to all things within yourself. When you have arrived at this point, you will no longer have to reason things out or experiment or go into research to fathom the causes of universal effects which you wish to produce by going into a business or inventing a machine. When you have thus arrived, you will know all things. All knowledge is already yours. You will not need to learn, for you will already know. The answer to any problem or the effect of any decision of yours should be within your comprehension before you start to do anything. That is what we mean by mind knowing instead of body sensing. Cosmic consciousness means all-knowing or mind knowing. Desire for cosmic knowing will illumine you with cosmic knowing, gradually, but that great desire, aided by great comprehension of God's ways, will hasten the dawning of cosmic knowing within you. One reason why it will hasten the coming of that supremacy is because the more you comprehend God's ways, the more you will meditate upon them. The glory of that full comprehension will open the door to the greatest of all the pleasures of man, the pleasure of ecstatic thinking, which constitutes the life of the genius or mystic. The geniuses and mystics of the world are few, but their works alone, of all man's creations, endure forever. All we have of culture comes from those few who work knowingly with God. The works of the many are forgotten tomorrows along with their very names. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 693. The few must be many degrees. The human race cannot survive unless more cosmic conscious men arise from the ashes of this dying race. We say to you, therefore, that you must give the effort needed to gain that supremacy degrees. It cannot come without effort upon your part, supreme and indefatigable effort. When you see a great genius sway a mighty audience and inspire in it the great rhythms of his thinking, you know that he could not have acquired that supremacy of power through desire alone unaccompanied by mighty effort. Desire to express musical rhythms was life itself to him. Degrees to be without it would mean torture too great to bear. He, therefore, spared no effort to gain his supremacy of comprehension, and to acquire mastery over the medium through which he had to express it. We, likewise, say to you that the measure of your own exaltation can never be achieved through desire alone. Degrees desire must be accompanied by action, the action of effort to comprehend. Degrees each effort of concentration, followed by decentration, makes comprehension more easy of attainment until there comes a time when flashes of comprehension come without effort. Degrees when that time comes, know then that you are close to God. Degrees you are walking and talking with God. Degrees you will then be able to vision the ends of your undertakings before you have started their beginnings, and that is as it should be. Seek that high level by much effort and much aloneness with God. We further consider the relation of the cube to the octave wave. We must now open doors to heretofore unknown, and even unsuspected universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 694. Mysteries. We will begin by asking ourselves the following questions for which science has never had an answer, and give the answer fully, in both word and diagram. 1. What and why is motion? and how does it come into being? 2. Why is it that the octave waves of the elements of matter, or of the color spectrum octave waves of light, consist of 8 vibrating tones of wave motion which are enclosed within 3 zeros of rest where motion ceases? This formula is universal in all octave waves. The octaves of the elements and spectrum have been considered to be 7 in number. That is because it has never been known that the number 4 is a pair, united as one. The octave wave consists of 4 balanced, but opposed pairs, 3 pairs being extended from a common equator, as well as each one of each divided pair having its own equator, the 4th pair being united as one body, divided by only one equator instead of 3. Herein follows the universal formula of rest and motion upon which our entire sciences of chemistry, metallurgy, and kindred sciences are found. See Figure 87. Also one of the 9 octaves of the elements of matter is diagrammed below it. See Figure 88. 3. Why is it that all motion is centered from within by a zero of rest and controlled from without by 2 other rest zeros? We cite the Earth's center of gravity and its 2 magnetic poles as an example which has no exception in any particle of matter, whether electron, atom, organic cell, planet or sun. We cite also the fulcrum and the lever. See Figures 89, 90. 91 and 92. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 695. Fig. Showing one of the 9 octave of the elements of matter. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 696. The great secret of the division of the universal equilibrium into pairs of oppositely unbalanced conditions which motivate the universal heartbeat through desire for balance and unity. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 697. The Cosmic Clock. Illustrating the impossibility of disturbing the balance of God's universe by even the weight of one flectron. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 698. Figure 94. In the above 5, of the 9 octaves of matter, the fulcrum and lever principle of dividing and extending one balanced condition into 2 opposed conditions to motivate the heartbeats of nature is graphically illustrated. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 699. In this connection you will recall the quotation from God's message of the divine Iliad which says, "For behold I am within all things, centering them, and I am without all things, controlling them." Why is it that every effect of motion starts at 0, seeks a point of 0 to rest, and returns to 0 to again rest before it can repeat its action-reaction? This is equally true of every action-reaction, great and small, whether it be the action-reaction pulsation of breathing, of throwing a ball in the air, of moving one finger, or of a dynamite explosion. Why is it that no one has yet observed, or recorded the fact that action and reaction are simultaneously recorded and sequentially repeated in reverse? This is a fundamental principle of natural law, yet up to this day the sequential repetition is all that is accounted for in the law of conservation of energy, and even the fact of reversal is omitted from that law. See Figures 90 to 94. Any action whatsoever divides an equilibrium into the 2 opposite conditions simultaneously. Compression piles up in the direction of motion and expansion takes place behind it. Witness, for example, the motion of an airplane which curves the pressure of compression ahead of it and the opposite evacuating pressure behind it. An equator is set up between the 2 which is exactly analogous to the equator of a bar magnet, Likewise, the electric current of the airplane's motion has polarized space exactly as the electric current has polarized the steel bar magnet of the laboratory. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 700. Witness also the black vacuous hole which centers any explosion. Whatever pressure is thrust outward by the explosion is borrowed from its center. Polarity has taken place because of motion only. Likewise, space has become curved in two waves for the same reason. Also, two conditions have been established which are the reverse of each other, the two being divided by an equator. Now comes the greatest of all the unanswered questions. 6. When the clergyman pronounces two separate and disunited people of opposite sex to be man and wife, then says to them, "Ye twain are now one," is there any scientific explanation for that declaration that two become one, or is that just a sentimental tradition? In other words, is there any electrical, chemical or spiritual change which takes place when two people of opposite sex become one? All of these 6 questions, as well as all other questions concerning any effect of motion whatsoever, are answerable by you or by us to the extent that each one knows the octave wave, the cube sphere which constitutes the wave, and the principles of balance which determine all effects in both extended divisions of the wave. Therefore know the wave. The measure of your knowledge of the wave is the measure of your power to achieve, just as the measure of your God-awareness is the measure of divine desire to make use of that power. We have heretofore said that he who becomes transcendent through knowledge of how to express his desire lives a transcendent life. Such universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 701 lives a more ecstatic, more masterful mental existence, makes fewer mistakes and does not experiment, neither does he rely upon others for advice or influence. That is what we mean by living a transcendent life. It means that your own divine knowing within you makes you the master of all physical effect, and you do not need to go to others for knowledge which is within yourself, nor do you need to experiment in any of the ways of life when the law which governs that experiment is yours. For your comfort we will remind you that it is not always easy, even for the most transcendent genius or mystic, to continually live his divine life. The human element is strong. It pulls and tugs at the mentality of the greatest among men, for all who must manifest in the body must combat and satisfy the natural urges of the body. The greatest genius in the world hungers, and when he must prepare and eat food for his body he is called back to a remembrance of his body from an absolute forgetfulness of it which he experiences when interpreting the divine rhythms of the high heavens. Remember this. Therefore, for the human element and the greatest among men will cause him to stumble, to make mistakes and to experiment when he need but turn about and seek his own divinity to again become master and live in the ecstasy of his own transcendency. We briefly comment on question number 6. You cannot find a better example of what benefit scientific knowledge can be to you than in the answer to the question as to why two disunited people. Universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 702 are different when they become united in a true marriage between true mates. For the rule does not apply when two people who are not true mates just marry. Two unmated humans are like two unmated chemical units of one pair, such as sodium and chlorine, lithium and fluorine, or potassium and bromine. Study these separate units of pairs in Figure 94, then review and restudy 75, 76. and 77 on page 661. Then study the system of the equators of the elements in Figure 84 on page 665, and of Figures 88 and 94 of this lesson. The important fact to note is that each equator of each pair is in exact opposition to its mate, each is the reverse of the other, also each is an extension from a common fulcrum which is a common equator for each pair. Now note another important fact: each one of each pair is divided by its own equator. This means that every disunited pair of units in all nature is controlled by three equators, centered, in each unit, by a point of rest which becomes a fulcrum for each unit of each pair. If you will now carefully restudy figures 78 to 83 on page 664, you will see the separated pair in figure 80 beginning to seek unity just as two human lovers reach out their desires for each other. Just so long as each of these two remain disunited, they each have a center of gravity within themselves and each has its own equator. The moment two centers of gravity become one with their fulcrum which centers their commonly shared equator, as you may plainly see in figure 81, the three equators become one, and the two centers of gravity which become one by withdrawing into their own fulcrum. Universal Law, Natural Science and Fellows Phy page 703. Such a union transforms the two, the alkaline and acid quality utterly leave the united pairs which are shown in figure 94. Also their metallic quality has left them. Another distinguishing feature is the transformation which takes place in their crystallization. No matter what system any polarized separated pair, 6 crystallize, and when dependent upon 3 equators and 2 centers of gravity, they all crystallize as true cubes when united as balanced pairs with but one center of gravity. Examine the crystals of sodium chloride, which is common table salt, and you will see these true cube forms without need of a magnifying glass. The true cube crystal occurs only in the united pairs, those which have but one equator between them, and one center of gravity, such as carbon, silicon, lithium fluoride, sodium chloride and potassium bromide. The centering suns of all such systems are also true spheres, and each of these systems revolves spirally, in one plane, like a disk. See figure 13 on page 166, figure 66 on page 491 and figures 57, 58 and 59 on pages 446 and 447, all separated pairs, such as lithium and chlorine, or any of the many you see in figure, crystallize in other systems which are cube sections. See figure 69 on page 521. You may now be wondering why that would make different people out of two humans, and if so, what is that difference? Does it add to their power or ability? In what measure are they transformed as human beings? In the answer to this lies the knowledge of the great import of true mating. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 704. When we say true mating, we mean matings between equal opposites of a pair, for mismatings of humans can be as explosive and destructive as mismatings in the chemical elements. True matings are rare, exceedingly rare, but in true matings the two united ones are no longer the same individuals, working independently from the fulcrums of themselves. They are no longer themselves, they are truly one self, with but one fulcrum, one equator and one center of gravity or balance, both meaning the same thing. Together they can accomplish more than they could as separate beings. Together, in such unity, they multiply all the power of one by the other one and bestow the total upon each, acting as one. This is nature's meaning to true mating. To better understand this change, let us observe its chemical effect upon marriages taking place between the elements of matter. Figure 94 illustrates this question quite simply. In it we have printed 5 of the 9 wave octaves of matter, the 5 which are within working range, and the range of physical perception of the scientist of today. On the positive side of the wave you will note part of the final octave which disappears into radioactive oblivion through radium, rhod, actinium, Ac, thorium-Th, uranium-X etc., into the invisible. The letters in the little circles are the symbols of the elements. We have projected 3 of these pairs of symbols and translated them into their familiar names for your better comprehension. The 3 pairs of opposites which we have projected are all in the one universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 705 positive and 1 negative series. Let us consider them. Fluorine, chlorine and bromine are acid metals. They belong to the mother principle of nature which unfolds outwardly from within. Their polarity is negative. Lithium, sodium and potassium are alkaline metals. They belong to the father principle of nature which refolds inwardly from without. Each of these separate units of each pair have certain chemical and electrical effects in combination with other elements. Each does certain predictable things with no exception. The moment, however, that either twain become one in marriage, they multiply their balance by eliminating 2 of the 3 equators of balance which controlled them in their separate states. Fluorine and lithium have no longer any of their metallic qualities when they unite as lithium fluoride. Like carbon they crystallize in true cubes and the suns of their systems are true spheres. They have become like carbon, a stony mineral which chemists call a salt when any acid and alkali pair unite. Likewise, there is not a trace of either fluorine nor lithium in lithium fluoride. The same is true of sodium chloride and potassium bromide. Also the reverse is true if either of these pairs are again divided. Each one of each pair reverts to its metallic condition the moment it is extended from its fulcrum. Carbon, for example, is a united pair of opposed metals. Its melting point is so high that it is difficult to extend into a divided pair, but if it were done we could have a new series of rustless metals of high conductivity which would be of extreme value to industry. When you pass some clay bank, or mass of feldspar, bauxite or other universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 706 non-metallic minerals, it does not occur to you that your aluminum airplanes and cooking utensils are made of such materials, yet they are. And so, also is the iron and steel of commerce taken out of the red earth of the hills. Silicon, granite and all of the rocky substances of earth are united pairs, married pairs, two becoming one to give stability to the planet. Metals are all extensions from a common fulcrum. If man divorces any stable, united, balanced pairs to procure metals from them, nature will eventually marry them again. The metals will rust away in time, and that which was at one time strong steel will again become the red earth of the hillside from which it was extended by man. Marriage between true mates means stability and balance of oneness coming to two unstable and unbalanced conditions. Pairs of humans thus united as one do not become one only through the attainment of electric balance, they become one consciously and spiritually. Two who have become thus united have multiplied themselves incalculably. The greatest gift of God to man is the gift of balanced mating. True matings are predictable in the elements. In Figure 94 the true matings are designated by connecting lines. If any one of the three pairs of true, balanced, matings used as illustrations should marry any one of any other of the three pairs, they would get along together quite harmoniously unless the true mate of either should appear. In the chemical elements a divorce would then take place immediately without any preliminaries whatsoever. Why is this? If you examined the crystals of any of such unbalanced universal law, natural science and philosophy page 707 mismatings as sodium and bromine, for example, or of potassium and chlorine, you would find that their crystals are not true cubes. Such married pairs would crystallize in a cubic system, but the cubes would be distorted and complexed by other faces than those 6 perfectly balanced ones which belong to the cube. This means that with any mismatings there is always a residue of unbalance, always something which has been unsatisfied. This is as true chemically as it is with humans. When humans marry close mates, even if not true mates, they should endeavor to find a common balance between the two and make the best of it, for true matchings among humans are rare. With the knowledge herein set down, one may be enabled to use better judgment in the choosing of a mate by letting his heart influence his decision rather than any one of the many motives people have for choosing mates. The more you can find in a mate which is like yourself, the more each of you will find balance in each other. For the saying that one should seek his opposite in mating is not true to natural law. In nature, like seals, like everywhere, not opposites. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy by Walter Russell, S.C., D., and Lau Russell. Lesson number 42. The Walter Russell Foundation, Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. Copyrighted 1951 by Walter and Lau Russell. One more step toward building the cube-sphere wave field. In the progress of these lessons, the time has now come to clear up much confusion regarding what is so commonly called the curvature of space, and sometimes referred to as this curved universe. We must clarify this confusion. In these lessons we have repeatedly said that all motion is curved. That does not mean that stillness is also curved. Motion springs from stillness and returns to stillness. The example of the fulcrum and the lever fully manifests this principle. Just as we live in the changing physical universe and the unchanging spiritual universe simultaneously, so also do we live in the universe of motion and the still universe of non-motion simultaneously. Likewise, we live in the undivided universe of mind-knowing and the divided universe of mind-thinking and sensing simultaneously. In order that you may more clearly understand the relation of stillness to motion, the undivided in relation to the divided, the changing in relation to the unchanging, and the spiritual light in relation to the physical lights of Wave 709. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 710. Motion. We will draw a simple picture which you may remember and understand more clearly than you would remember a finished picture of the same thing. Here it is. You have a desire to manifest an idea of yours. You ask God to give you the power and the substance to fulfill your desire. 3. God gives you 6 mirrors of His still light, all put together in the shape of a perfect cube. Within the 6 are 3 more mirrors of His light, all 3 set at right angles to each other. 4. God then says, "Here is the power and the substance you have asked for to fulfill your desire and manifest your idea. My magnetic surveyors have measured it out for you in my undivided universe in the exact measure of your desire. I give you free will to do as you wish within the 6 mirrors of my light which balance and control your actions from without, and 3 more balancing mirrors within the 6 which control your actions from within, for I say to you that these 9 mirrors of my light are my law, and they are also the means of enforcing my law. These 9 light mirrors of 0 curvature and 0 motion are your limitations, and the measure of them is the measure of your desire. You may change their measure, and your limitations, by changing the intensity of your desire, but beyond these 9 you cannot go in any direction without arriving at the 0 of your beginning and ending. Whatever you do in my divided universe, whether good or bad, balanced universal law, natural science and philosophy page 711, or unbalanced, or helpful or hurtful within the boundaries set for you, will come back to you in the measure set by you for your own universe of your own desire. For long eons you have built your universe in your own image and desire. You have manifested that image of yourself for ages upon long ages, for you will not know me in you. There will come a time when you shall begin to know the light of me in you. You will then manifest me. You will then build your universe in my image. To know the light of me will be your sole desire. To seek and find my kingdom will be your sole purpose. What you do for yourself you do for all are one in me. You may reflect and extend your desire to all the universe to make a world of your desire with the desires of other men, but not of motion, or change your unbalance, or curvature shall pass my equalizing boundaries set for you and all mankind without being voided, where my zero of rest ends all moving things, and begins them again at that zero of rest which is alone in me. This three-dimensional cube universe of 90 above unconventional manner of telling a scientific story may not be true to textbook form, but more of scientific, philosophic and moral truth can be gleaned from it than many times that space could tell in more conventional lesson form. It is a good preliminary to the more detailed analysis of the radio cube sphere universe of wave motion which man has not yet begun to fathom. It also graphically states that man is in the midst of a universe of law and order which he may violate to any extent he chooses, but at his own cost, or he may universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy page 712 find the glory and ecstasy of working with the law and order which surrounds him when he at last sees the light which leads him out of the dark. Having had, and enjoyed this allegory or descriptive interlude, let us now return to lesson form to better understand that our physical universe of motion consists of cube sphere wave fields within wave fields, both majestic and microscopic, one within the other and without the other throughout a shapeless, boundless infinity of imagined space which is as unreal as the cosmic cinema illusions which are forever being cast upon it. It may be that you are not yet sufficiently advanced to understand the illusion of it, but you certainly are sufficiently advanced to understand the mechanics of it. This shall be our purpose. It seems difficult to some to comprehend how planes of zero curvature can be possible in a curved universe of wave motion. Let us begin to make this fact of nature comprehensible by a very simple example of how a curved wave universe rises from flat planes of zero curvature, and how two-way motion simultaneously springs from an unchanging state of rest. Although this fact has been graphically exemplified in relation to the fulcrum and lever in figures 89 to 92, and in other places during these lessons where motion has been divided by equators where no motion is, let us exemplify this question in another way. Let us sit together beside a quiet lake whose surface is completely at rest. As we look down upon it we realize its unchanging aspect. It is all the same in every direction. No matter where we look, one could not locate a universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy page 713. Point upon it and again reicate that apostrophe point : why is this? It is because the stillness or equilibrium or balance which characterizes that surface has not yet been divided by sire to manifest motion by exerting some force to disturb the stillness. We now supply the desire and exert the forces needed to divide that one unchanging condition of stillness. 29 Post conditions, by hurling a stone into the water. See figure 950. The instant the motion of the stone begins in your hand, you have begun to divide the undivided universe into a series of 9 equators, which not only control the disturbance of universal balance at every point of its path, but the wave-fields which bound these equators are surveyed and measured by God's magnetic light for repetition all over his universe at the rate of 186,400 miles per second, which is 7 times around this earth every second. It seems incredible that such an unimportant event should be recorded in our sun 7 seconds later, or in our nearest star 9 years later. Fact. In figure 95 the water surface is marked A and B. The stone is marked C and the place of impact upon the water surface is marked D. In figure 96 the harmonic tones for sequential waves are marked E, all extended from D. Figure S. 97-98, -99 and 100 exemplify the building up of the octave wave caused by the falling stone and the sequential repetitions of it upon the lake's surface degrees. It is important to note that every wave is repeated in reverse to its neighbor, which divides it by its cube system of 9 equators. Then, mirrors it in reverse to its neighboring wave fields degrees. Naturally you cannot see the cubic wave fields of measured and mirrored universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 714, showing how the Liouvre wave universe of motion arises from equators of zero curvature and returns to their stillness. Universal Law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 715. Light which bound them, but you can know them, and in knowing them you can better comprehend God's ways and also know that God's ways apply to you. For they are your ways. God's ways are balanced and your ways must be balanced within the wave field in which you act. That which you can see, however, is the result arising from thus dividing stillness into motion to produce changing effect from unchanging cause. You can now locate a point and relocate it. Likewise, you can count and measure that which, heretofore, was impossible to count or to measure. Likewise, you can see that what you have given to gravity by simultaneously taking from space, you must sequentially re-give to space by taking it from gravity. You can, likewise, see that the moment the motion of wave building began, curvature also began upon both sides of the one equator which you can see, the wave axis. And curvature likewise began upon both sides of each of the 9 equators in every wave, and as you sit there and watch the lake surface become still once more, you will know that all curvature ceases when motion ceases, just as all change and dimensions of lengths, breadth and thickness which accompanied motion disappear when motion ceases. You may also learn another great lesson in watching troughs and crests of waves interchanging with each other constantly until there are no longer any troughs and crests. You would be greatly surprised if waves piled up to crests and down to troughs and stopped there. You know that that is impossible. You know that when one balanced condition is divided into 2 that they must interchange. You know that the wave motion will continue until the water becomes calm again. Universal Law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 716. The lesson which you can learn from this is that all motion is the result of dividing a balanced condition into 2 unstable, or unbalanced conditions. If, therefore, all motion is out of balance, the only reason for motion is that it is seeking balance. Now consider the trough and the crest of a wave. Both have been extended from the calm surface of the motionless water by dividing the one condition into 2. That calm surface represents stability, the wave trough and crest represents instability. The calm surface becomes one of the 9 equators which controls the pulsations of its extended waves. As soon as the measure of desire for motion which the stone extended to the water dies out, all wave troughs and crests will become one with their common equator from which they were extended. The spiritual lesson which you may learn from this is that whenever you perform any action whatsoever, you are dividing a balanced condition of rest into 2 unbalanced conditions which must react upon each other, and interchange with each other to find the balanced condition of rest from which you extended them. That means that whenever you do anything, or say anything, whether in your business or social life, you have set something in motion which is going to be good for you if you can keep its extensions in balance, or it is going to be bad for you, and cause you to face many problems if you do not keep the interchange between the 2 in balance with each other. In your control of those actions, which you set in motion, lies your happiness, success, prosperity and health, or the opposites of these qualities. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 717. With knowledge of God's ways to help make them your ways, your decisions which cause all of your actions will conform to God's law of rhythmic balanced interchange in everything you do, and it will be this knowledge which will bless your life where ignorance of it could ruin your whole career. We now build the 9 equators of cube-sphere wave fields. Let us look more into God's ways. Let us have deeper understanding of how He makes His laws and how He enforces them. We know that God's laws are inexorable. We know that it is impossible to escape the penalties of any breach of His law, and we should know that it is equally impossible to escape the blessings which come from working with His law. God has but one law, His law of balance. His universe is balanced. It is at rest as an equilibrium. To disturb that equilibrium is impossible, but one can appear to disturb it by dividing it into pairs of oppositely unbalanced conditions which constantly interchange to keep in balance with each other. If you hurt yourself by losing your balance and falling, God is not punishing you for it. You are punishing yourself. God is not angry with you for hurting yourself, nor is He sorry for you. You have but had one more experience in trying to live within His orderly universe, and each experience should draw you closer to God. To draw closer to God you must know His ways, for His universe is orderly and balanced. Your universe must, likewise, be orderly and balanced. Let us quote here what God tells us of His ways in the message of the Divine Iliad. I am balance. In me all my imaginings are balanced in their seeming unbalance. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 718. I add, but that which I add to one pulsation of my thinking I subtract from the other one. I divide, but as I divide I equally multiply. That is God's way. If He violated it ever so slightly, there would be disaster of cosmic proportions in His heavens as stars, suns and planets crash together instead of continuing in their paths for ages, always being in balance with each other even to the weight of 1 milligram. Why does a man's business crash, or why does he lose a friend or become ill or meet with an accident? The answer is all contained in that one word, balance. Now let us graphically illustrate, step by step, how God will multiply your desires and give you greater powers if you work with Him and His law. First you must have a desire which you wish to express by giving it a body and setting it in motion. No matter what that desire is, whether it be to invent something, build a business, become a doctor, or lawyer, or builder of bridges. Then go and talk to God about it. Ask God to work with you to fulfill your desire. Ask Him for the power and the substance to fulfill your desire. Ask Him also For the knowledge to work knowingly with him, ask also for his inspiration and his ecstasy so that your creation will be masterly and enduring. You will find yourself spending much time in meditation with God concerning your desire. You will talk much with him. You will hear him counseling you, thinking with you, through your inner voice. You may hear him says, in the measure you ask I will give, but I counsel you to ask little and learn to balance it before asking more. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 719. At the precise moment you begin your very first action to set your idea in motion, God will give you 6 mirrors of his invisible light shaped like a cube. Within those 6 mirrors of light are 3 more, all set at right angles to each other degrees, and the measure of this cube of light which he gives you is the measure of your desire. As the measure of your desire grows, as it must grow if you work knowingly with God, the 9 mirrors of light grow with it to contain your growing idea. There is no limitation to the dimensions of your achievement so long as you work knowingly with God and do not ask for a larger measure at a time than your knowing can keep in balance with the law of balance which those 9 mirrors of light must enforce. Some facts about the creation of bodies. Let us now remind you that visible matter emerges from invisible space and is swallowed up by it. Also that the physical universe of 2 visible lights arises from the one invisible light which God is, and must return to it as motion likewise returns to stillness and sound disappears into the silence from which it sprang. God's creation is therefore the result of God's desire to give visible form and motion to his invisible idea. To accomplish this purpose he builds a material body of visible light which is his universe. Your creation is, likewise, the result of your desire to give visible expression to your invisible idea. In other words, all that God ever does, or you ever do, is to build visible bodies out of invisible light and set them in motion to manifest invisible idea. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 724. A period of time, all bodies eventually disappear into the invisible equilibrium from which they sprang and reappear in rhythmic periodicities of time. God's only workers used in building his universe are the 2 electric workers which divide his light of knowing into the 2 lights of his thinking. Each of these workers pull away from each other in opposite radial directions. One of them pulls inward toward a point of concentration, and thus a pressure of compression is brought into seeming being. The other worker thrusts outward in the opposite radial direction, and an opposing pressure of expansion is brought into seeming being. Compression is the mechanical manifestation of the Creator's concentrative thinking, and expansion is the mechanical effect of his decentrative thinking. Everything that is created in this universe is the result of interchange between these 2 opposing pressures in the measure of desire for creative expression. Masterliness in any effect of creation lies in keeping these 2 opposing forces in balance. We pause here to talk about pressures. It is important that you understand what we mean by pressures which exist only in the divided universe of motion. Motion is impossible in an equilibrium. If you sit in a closed room of even temperature with only one pressure condition, you cannot possibly feel any motion taking place in it. If, however, you open a window, you will feel a rush of cold air coming through the window to equalize the cold air which is outside, and the warm air which is inside. An equator divides the 2. When the pressure, which is outside, equalizes the pressure which is inside, motion then ceases and the invisible equator disappears also. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 721. Or suppose you sit in that closed room of equilibrium pressure where all is motionless and still. If you put a cake of ice in one end of the room and a piece of molten iron in the other end, you have divided the one balanced condition into two opposed pressure conditions, and an invisible equator arises between the two to control the universal balance, which that opposed pair has seemingly upset. An electric current immediately appears, for wherever motion appears it means that the two conditions of polarity exist, and polarity is impossible without an electric current to divide stillness into two opposing states of motion. Now you sit at the wheel of your car, but it is perfectly motionless. The power to move you at great speed is there, yet the car does not move. Why is this? It is because you have not divided the power of your cylinders into two opposing pressures, which resent that division and try, with all their might, to get back to the one condition of rest from which they sprang. For that sole reason each pressure interchanges with the other, each from its own side of the equator which divides and controls their opposition, instead of the one zero pressure condition which is in your motionless car. You extend a central point in that zero of stillness to two other 0 points. You now have a fulcrum and a lever which will cause your car to move the moment you divide that undivided condition by creating the two polarized electric conditions of compression and expansion. These two opposing pressures interchange with tremendous force in the endeavor of each to seek the balance of rest from which they were divided by an equator set up at the centering zero to control that interchange. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 722. When you think of opposing pressures, always remember that the power which either one has to move, is borrowed from the other one. 100-pound pressure of compression is possible only by evacuating an equal 100 pounds from the opposite side of an equator which divides the two. If, for example, you connect two tanks of equal size by a tube, and pump the air out of one into the other, you have multiplied the pressure of one by equally dividing the pressure of the other. What you have added to the zero of their mutual equilibrium in one tank you have gained by subtracting an equal amount from the zero in the other tank, which is on the other side of their dividing equator. You have added a 100-pound pressure on one side of an equator by subtracting a 100-pound pressure from the other side. Mathematically expressed it would be as follows: x plus 0 equals x minus 0. 0 has not been exceeded in the operation, for the total adds up to 0. You have but divided an equilibrium into pairs of oppositely unbalanced conditions which strongly seek balance in their mutual equator. These opposite electric conditions do not attract each other, as the Coulomb law states. The positively charged tank is endeavoring to explode outward to find balance in its equator, and the negatively discharged tank is endeavoring to explode inwardly until its pressure has been equalized with the equilibrium from which it was divided. When the equalization takes place, motion then ceases, the polarized condition depolarizes and the equator disappears. The condition which electricians term a dead storage battery has taken place. It is as though the lever is removed from a fulcrum. The fulcrum is Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 723, still there, with all of its power for expression ready to be expressed at any time. The lever is again placed upon it for the purpose of dividing its balanced power into two equally unbalanced powers which resent the division. We pause again to talk about energy now that these many lessons have clarified for you the meaning of polarity as being the division of the undivided one unconditioned equilibrium of the magnetic light of God's knowing into the two conditions and unbalanced lights of His electric thinking. You will now fully understand how untrue to nature is the claim that heat is energy. You now understand that heat is one of the two conditions which result from electric polarization, and that heat is only one end of the lever while cold is the other end. Heat is borrowed from cold and cold is borrowed from heat. They are one. Heat is the result of compression, cold is the result of expansion. Interchange between the two performs work which the interchange continues, but ceases when the two equalize each other at their equator. Gravitation will perform work. Witness, for example, the falling waters of Niagara which generate electric current by turning a wheel. Radiation will also perform work. Witness, for example, the rising air through a chimney shaft which also will generate electric current by turning a wheel. Cooling vapor will perform work by contracting. Witness the condensation of vapor into a cyclone, or a river. Heating vapor will also perform work by expanding into steam. Witness the steam engine. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 724. The first law of thermodynamics, which says that heat is energy, is not true to nature, for heat only expresses energy when cold interchanges with it, and cold, likewise, they are equal mates. They are two opposites in polarity. Gravitation polarizes, radiation polarizes. Figure 104, p. 739. Likewise, the second law of thermodynamics is not true to nature. This second law says that energy cannot run uphill, it can only run downhill. In other words, radiant energy has no compensating opposite which generates, hence the expanding universe theory. Uphill means higher potential. Downhill means lower potential. Water which is rising into the clouds is an expression of radiant energy. That same water which condenses as rain and falls into the rivers and Niagaras of Earth is an expression of generative energy. Gravitation multiplies energy. Gravitation and radiation are equal opposites which interchange continually to create this electric universe of matter and perform all of its work. Gravitation is one stroke of the piston of energy which runs uphill to perform work by contracting. Radiation is the other stroke of the piston which runs downhill to perform work by expanding. Radiation divides energy. This whole universe is one majestic compression-expansion engine. Likewise, it is a huge electric battery. Would you say of your car's self-starter battery that the expansion stroke of the piston did all of the work, which is equivalent to what science says about radiant energy? Now would you claim that your outgoing breath alone kept you alive without need of an incoming generative breath? No, of course you would not. Then why say that heat is energy and that cold is less heat? Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 725. Whenever you are puzzled regarding such questions, review in your mind the temperature cycle given earlier in these lessons, which reads as follows. Cold contracts, contraction generates, generation heats, heat expands, expands, sign radiates, radiation cools, and the cycle repeats itself endlessly. If this seems complicated, simplify it as follows. Cooling bodies gravitate and heat as they gravitate, heating bodies radiate, and cool as they radiate. Thus the interdependent pairs of opposite pressures gravitate and radiate in opposite directions to keep the heartbeat of this universal compression-expansion pump which creation is in operation. One is as important as the other. Without each other each one would be powerless. The entirety of this divided, polarized, universe consists of high-potential visible bodies of solid gravitating matter, surrounded by low-potential invisible bodies of expanded radiating matter. There is not 1 inch in all of this universe which is not composed of these two conditions of matter divided into wave fields whose equators control these divisions and insulate each wave field from all others. We will draw a graphic picture of how polarization keeps this pumping process going on forever. Let your imagination amplify this descriptive picture. Imagine the invisible pistons which forever pull inward toward a center, and thrust outward from it, to be giant arms of the universal two-way pump which molds hot suns to pattern the starry firmament of God's heavens. Then let your imagination liken them to magic knitting needles, countless trillions of them to every cubic inch, shuttling inwards and outwards in the radio loom of the universe, tipped with rainbow threads of light to weave universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 726 Countless patterns of the myriads of living, growing things which spring from God's earths into his heavens to manifest the thinking of his omniscient mind. Keep on imagining. Think further and deeper until you find yourself fascinated with the countless variety and complexity of patterned forms which those two interweavers of God's light rays bring out of the unseen universe of no thing, and nowhere, countless many things and then everywhere. Out of this two-way electric motion creation becomes. That is what we say because that is what we think. We think of creation as something which is. We never think of it as something which only seems. We never think of the countless myriads of growing, living, dying, born bodies as motion, only transient spiral motion with no permanency whatsoever. It never occurs to us to think of a granite rock, which so rigidly ignores our sledgehammer blows, as but the two-way opposed spiral interweavings of light-threaded cosmic needles which shuttle in and out from cold to hot, and hot to cold a trillion times faster to weave that granite rock than it moves to weave our soft flesh. Try to imagine these interweavings of polarized light threads as being the in-breathing out-breathing sequences of the bodies which they are eternally building and tearing apart to rebuild. Try to think of dense solids, which you can so unmistakably see and feel, as but closely packed little light waves which become very hot because they are in each other's way. Then realize that they got that way because the breathing process of the universe divides light into visible solids, which we think of as universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 727. Bodies, and invisible gases, which we think of as space, live. Never think of these two as ones or that one is living and the other is not. Yet we know that our own bodies of gravitating matter cannot live without interchanging with bodies of radiating matter. Constantly remind yourself of the fact that the continuance of every body, both visible and invisible, gravitative or radiative, positive or negative, is dependent upon receiving a continuous supply of that half of itself which is on the other side of a dividing equator. These two conditions must interchange with the other, each must seek and become the other. Consider your own solid body, for example. It is surrounded by gases which have become gases because that which is your solid body has been pumped out of it. Your solidity is due to its emptiness. Your inbreathing evacuated it to make you. It is the gift of space to you. You cannot live unless space continues to give of itself to you. Conversely, space cannot continue to be emptied or evacuated to give to you. You must re-give. That is the law. So you re-give to the other half of your divided body that which it gave to you. To do so you breathe out then in again. That is what interchange between opposites means, the meaning of interchange in breathing. Now what happens when you breathe in? The low potential which you breathe in from the cold of space becomes high potential which heats your body as it compresses within you. It generates energy for your body. You then re-give to space that which space has given you. You breathe out into space the Comper's universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 728. High potential which you transformed from space. Your compressed hot breath expands and cools, You radiate your high potential energy into low potential by expanding a great volume of space on the other side of a dividing equator, which becomes cold as a consequence of its expansion. Now imagine these two unbalanced conditions finding themselves as uncomfortable and keeping up that strain of pulling away from each other, and their equators, as two children would be who were playing seesaw, and one was high above their equator and the other as far below, just as the two children must reverse their conditions by reversing their positions, so, likewise, the two interchanging interweavers of light and bodies must reverse their conditions by reversing their positions. Each becomes the other, as all opposites in nature continually do. Let your imagination dig deeper still in relation to those two forever interchanging lights of motion. Let us think of the incoming red light which transcold into forms, heat in us as our incoming breath. Conversely, let us think of the outgoing blue light which transforms heat into cold in us as our outgoing breath. Think this over for a while and breathe in and out slowly and concentratedly while you think it over. Now look about you and see all other people breathing in and out in wave sequences as you do, and see them moving about, as you move about, with great energy while they breathe in and out. Now give thought to the impossibility of any of them moving about if they stop breathing. Then look about and see growth everywhere you look, growing bodies of people, trees, flowers, insects. Those buds of yesterday are flowers today. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 729. Newborn leaves almost visibly unfold. A great tree branches out over your head which you brought home under your arm the day your baby was born. And the field is red with strawberries which were not there last Sunday when you walked there. Why do bodies thus grow? What is growth? These bodies all breathe in and out as you do, and they grow as you do. Flowers, trees, insects, strawberries in the field. Knowing what you now know of motion, can you not clearly see that motion alone makes bodies, and conversely bodies are naught but motion? Give further deep thought to this and you will then readily understand that growing bodies are the result of in-breathing and out-breathing. Instead of saying all bodies breathe in and out, we go farther than that and say that all bodies are but recordings of the universal breath. Can you not now compare the incoming-outgoing breath with the concentrative-decentrative sequences of God's electric thinking? We have many times said that the creating universe is but the electric record of God's thinking in forever repeating cycles. Can you not now see that all interchange between all pairs of opposite conditions is for the one purpose of recording thought and matter? It is really very simple. In-breathing rolls up little spheres of matter and adds then to the body to make it grow. Your body grows because you breathe in from space to make more cells for your body. The tree grows that way. So do flowers and forests and planets. The sun grows that way. It breathes in for 6 years and grows very hot, so hot. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 730, that it boils near its equator and forms great spots which we can see. Then it breathes out for the other half of its cycle and cools very much, so much that part of its molten liquid condenses to add to the solidity of its polar parts. We do likewise. We have a life cycle of 70 or 80 years, just as we have a breath cycle of 25 or 30 to the minute. Our incoming breath generates more little vital cells for 1/2 of our life cycle than our outgoing breath radiates away from us. The outgoing breath then becomes stronger and radiates more of you into your other half. Instead of increasing the intensity of your polarization, you are then depolarizing. Instead of living vitally, you are slowly dying by devitalizing. Try to realize that every effect of motion in this universe means that it is for the purpose of expressing idea by dividing it into two aspects of that idea. Life, for example, is one idea. When divided and set in motion, it has two aspects instead of one. The two are life and death, both being one. Breathing inward expresses one half of the life idea. Breathing outward expresses the other half. Each leads to the other. When your consciousness is more awakened, you will think of life and death as you think of day and night, with full knowledge that morning will again come as surely as night follows day, each leading to the other with periods of rest between to mark the division of one into a seeming two in every phase of your existence on earth as a body. That is what life and death mean. That is also what in Breathing and Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 731, outbreathing mean. Each manifests the other and each leads to the other, all for the purpose of manifesting life by living it, and love by expressing it through the action-reaction of giving and re-giving. Again we say there is no death. There is naught but life. Life is a wonderful journey through light of eternal day which comes with the coming of dawn, while death is the glory of awaiting the light which cometh again at the coming of dawn. We summarize and simplify. We often gain greater comprehension regarding new ideas which we are trying to master by repeating them in other words and other forms which have the same meaning but are approached from different angles. For this reason, read the following two paragraphs slowly and with great concentration. As the cold blue light threads a space spiral across their wave-field equator toward their North Pole, which, likewise, is their gravitative center, they compress and turn red, then orange, then yellow-white, because of generating cold into heat as their inward spiral twistings wind light up into compressed incandescent spheres of high electric potential. Conversely, as the red light threads spirally recross their wave-field equator toward their South Pole, which, likewise, is their radiative center, they expand from yellow to green, then to blue and blue-violet, because they radiate heat into cold as their opening spirals unwind those hot visible spheres into cold invisible ones, for rebirth into visible ones. Do you realize that what is written in the above two paragraphs is all there is to this whole physical universe of living dying bodies of matter? We have Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 732, but describe two ways of seeming motion which forever manufacture visible and invisible pairs of bodies. These continually interchange with each other so that each half alternately becomes the other half. This interchange is repeated eternally, forever and forever. That is what creation is, just a mind-imagined journey from rest in the light to rest in the light. Do you realize what this means? For one example, consider our Sun, which centers the 400 or 500 million mile disk or cone base, upon which our planets spiral outward into their depolarizing oblivion. In order for that hot dense sun to shine in the skies as it does, there must be an equal and opposite minus black negative hole on the other side of its equator. Some future day, eons upon eons hence, our sun will shine where that evacuated black hole now is, and our planets will radiate away from their parent sun toward their depolarizing zero, just as they now do in their present position. Their reincarnation in their own pattern is as true regarding solar systems as they are regarding man, and all resolving, dissolving, living, dying, integrating, disintegrating things. Compression anywhere is balanced by equal expansion on the other side of their mutual equator. Each must become the other alternately. See figures 101 and 102. Now read the following 5 supernal paragraphs with equal concentration. 3. Creation is an eternally continuous cosmic game of seesaw played between two electric bodybuilders, destroyers and rebuilders, which forever oscillate between hot centers of high-potential compressed spherical solids, and cold centers of equally high-potential expanded spherical holes, for the purpose of manifesting the idea of God's knowing by simulating that idea. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 733. Any force expressed anywhere simultaneously creates an equal and opposite force in reverse to void it and repeat it. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 734. Any system, whether of an atom of the ATF, NTS or gone a solar system in our Milky Way, if upon the amplitude of ITS wave in 90 degrees from ITS wave axis, ITS central sun is a true sphere and all of ITS planets revolve upon the plane of their sun's equator. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 735. In the moving form images which manifest his thinking idea is never created, it is but simulated, for the fulcrum of the moving levers of the cosmic seesaw which gives to the universe its heartbeat, is the stillness of the undivided one light which God's knowing is. 5. The moving levers are the two equally opposed lights of the divided electric universe which God's thinking is. 6. Every measure of positive force developed by one extension of the lever from its fulcrum simultaneously develops an equal negative force in the other extension. As the cosmic pendulum moves one way to manifest power, its invisible counterpart moves the other way with equal power to pull it back for repetition. The motivating force which seemingly divides the one light of universal rest into North Pole centers of compression and South Pole centers of expansion is desire to create moving form images to manifest ideas which they but simulate. You are likely to become confused by the two references in paragraph 3 to high potential centers being equal in both positive and negative counterparts on opposite sides of equators. Let us be sure you understand this principle. High potential develops in the radial direction toward both centers and low potential develops in the direction which is radially away from both centers and toward mutual equators. Potential is zero at every dividing equator. Low potential then reverses to high as each opposite pulls away from its equator toward either of the two opposed centers. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 736. Witness, for example, the two cells of a storage battery. The potential in each cell is equal. The power of one to pull inward, centripetally toward its center of gravitation, is equal to the power of the other to thrust outward, centrifugally, from its center of radiation. The equator for both opposed cells is between them. Potential is zero upon that plane, therefore, potential lowers to zero in the direction of depolarization and increases to maximum as polarization intensifies in the two polar directions. All particles of light which are ejected from either the cathode or anode poles, as heretofore stated in earlier lessons, are negative electrons which are expanding and discharging as their potential lowers on their way to their common equator. Immediately they pass that zero plane they reverse their charges, both become positive. They become positrons. Both are then charging. All light particles are alike. When found in different relation to their equators, and different positions and directions of motion, they are called by different names such as neutrons when they are on wave amplitudes, photons, positrons and other such names, when found in other parts of the wave. Nor are these few names all they have. All of the known 90-odd elements are made up of these same particles, but all have different names when found in different positions in their waves. Elements exhibit different characteristics because of their differences in gyroscopic relation to equators and amplitude. If light particles are part of systems which rotate upon a plane near wave amplitude, we say they are iron, or copper or boron, and many others. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 737. If their gyroscopic relation is on wave amplitudes 90 degrees from wave axes, we say they are carbon, or silicon, or sodium chloride, and many others. See Figure 103. Chemists and physicists commonly believe that all of the elements are different substances. There are no substances in the universe. There is not Hut motion which simulates substance. Every difference in motion causes each so-called substance to seem to have different attributes. If we remember, however, that what we think of as different elements are but different pressure conditions of the same kind of light particles, our ability to understand God's ways will become simplified. A good example of the above statement which demonstrates that elements are not separate things, but just different pressure conditions, was given in Lesson No. 41, which explained the fact that the metallic elements completely lose their metallic attributes when two opposite metals united as a salt. They also lost other attributes, such as ductility, malleability, conductivity or fusibility by heat or electric conductivity. It would be well to register the following very important fact about matter in your mind at this point. All matter is formed in light waves. As there are no 2 points in any wave where the pressure is the same, no two particles of matter can be the same in potential or condition. All forming matter is of the potential of its place of birth. Therefore, all particles of matter float in orbits of equal potential in the system of their birth, always following their primaries, and always changing as their primaries change. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 738. The same particle of light which is now sodium, will progress all through the 9 octaves of the elements, and be known by many names as its attributes change to the attributes which distinguish one element from another. Conclusion in explaining the cube sphere principle, and the division of the cube into its 9 equators, which not only enforce God's one law of balance, but determine the octave tones of the spectrum and the elements of matter, it is necessary to be more than explicit. The reason for this is because the entire basis of the principle lies hidden in the invisible universe beyond the powers of scientists to determine by research. Such knowledge can come only from the consciousness of one who has been enabled to see the universe as a whole. Cosmic illumination makes that possible by not only freeing the mind from body limitations but by multiplying extrasensory perception during the period of illumination to such an extraordinary extent that the sense perception reaches through the entire 360 degrees of the wave cycle, instead of but a small arc of that cycle. The more that humanity understands the inexorability of the workings of those balancing equators of light which enforce universal balance in all things, the more mankind will understand the hopeless futility of defying God's law by working against it. Conversely, the more that mankind understands the tremendous power one gains by working with God's law of balance, the more mankind will advance individually and collectively as a transcendent race. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 739. Therefore, we again say to you that the measure of your power to find happiness, peace, prosperity and glory and masterly achievement lies in the measure of your knowledge of God's ways and your desire to make God's ways your ways. Matter emerges from space because of the polarizing power of gravitation and is swallowed up by space because of the depolarizing relaxation of power by radiation. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy by Walter Russell S.C. D. and Lau Russell. Lesson number 43. The Walter Russell Foundation. Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. Copyrighted 1951 by Walter and Lau Russell. We continue the cube sphere of the four-dimensional universe of time and curved motion. The basic underlying principle of God's creating universe of two-way motion is the equilibrium of absolute stillness. It is the stillness of the magnetic light of God's knowing. The entirety of God's still light of knowing is a fulcrum from which the electric lever of God's thinking extends from every point of that stillness to create an illusion of reality through motion. Do you now fully realize that everything which your senses tell you are 1,000 different substances, is only motion? There is no substance in all of this universe. Creation is motion, vibrating wave motion of seeming substance which comes and goes, springing from rest and returning to rest. And has it ever occurred to you that your senses are but motion which feel other motion? Do you also fully realize that there is no such thing as time in a universe of rest in which there is no sequence? Do you realize that sequence of 741? Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 742. Vibrating wave motion is the only thing which makes you think that there is such a thing as time. Do you also realize that there is no such thing as dimension, no height, no length, breadth or thickness to anything except transient motion which appears to your senses, and then disappears from them? We shall not take space for a more involved and scientific treatise on this illusion of motion which we think of as creation, because there is still too much of more importance for these few remaining lessons. But we do wish to say enough to set your own imagination and knowledge at work so that you can set your values on actual reality and not waste your life away by giving your thoughts and energies to a mirage with the mistaken thought that there is substance in a mirage. It may help form your thoughts by imagining yourself witnessing a drama at a motion picture show. Let us review what happens. You first view an unchanging, motionless, colorless screen. Let us liken that blank screen to the blank screen of space upon which nothing is seemingly happening, nothing whatsoever is dividing that blankness into forms or events as yet. A motion picture projection camera suddenly begins to divide that silent, formless, motionless, undivided surface into many moving forms of many events which now take place and excite your senses to respond to the motion. All of this motion represents an idea which has arisen from the thinking of someone's mind. Creation is but the dramatization of idea by projecting it from the stillness of knowing into a time-space universe of thinking. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 743. Idea must have formed bodies which must move to simulate the idea, and sounds must arise from the silence, curved sound waves which bend in reversed pairs from equators which merely lend something to each for them to make believe with for a time until the lendings come due and must be repaid. All of this is done by projecting undivided white light through patterned black and white light negatives into mirrors and lenses of the projection machine, which seemingly divides the one still light into a seeming two which move. Formlessness is thus divided into seeming form, silence into seeming sound, and unchanging condition into seeming change. Time begins also when the picture begins, for until then there are no sequences of events to create time. When the projector shuts off the dividing light, all motion ceases. Likewise, all of the effects of that polarizing division cease. You can no longer see. hear or otherwise sense anything upon that screen, for there are no vibrating waves to make your senses vibrate with wave motion. To you the play is finished. You quite naturally understand that it is all illusion created by divided lights, patterned forms of ideas, and the optical effects which mirrors and lenses can produce to make you believe that those racing horses and shouting men are real. You know that they are not, however. All you have seen is motion simulating idea, motion dominated by intelligence, and motivated by desire. Why then do you not know that the projected optical illusion produced by the division of two lights in a wave field of nature's cosmic cinema also is unreal? You see all wave motion cease on the lake, and that picture Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 744, comes to a seeming end. You see the storm cease and that picture comes to an end. But you never see the whole universal picture cease and come to rest. It is always going on in continuous wave fields. Nature is a continuous cinema and you are an actor in it, but you are not aware of that. There is always the pulse beat of that electrical polarization process going on, which we think of as life or the life principle. Your senses can never cease while you are a part of that universal heartbeat. To you that becomes reality because you have never been enabled to see the whole motion picture drama of creation come to an end. You can never see the blank screen of space upon which that cosmic drama is to be projected, as you can see the blank screen upon which man's motion picture plays are going to be projected. All you can see in all nature is motion which simulates idea, dominated by intelligence, and motivated by desire. For this reason you have never suspected that each wave field in nature is a perfect motion picture projection machine, all completely fitted with the mirrors and lenses which divide light into waves of motion and the pairs of opposite conditions which makes the vast complexity of optical effects which creation is possible. The mirrors and lenses of nature's wave field projection machines are even enclosed in six-sided boxes, to insulate them from outside effects, just as man's machines are enclosed for the same reason. These lessons are drawing nearly too close to more than touch upon this principle, but it is imperative to give a brief explanation of nature's mechanics which makes it possible to create this vast illusion of change. Time. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 745. In dimensions of substances where neither change, time, dimension or substance have any being. Let us, therefore, briefly unfold the mystery of how form, color, sounds, heat, cold, solidity, tenuity, compression and expansion pressures, and all of the quantities of many things that bodies are composed of, are thrown on the screen of cosmic space postulates. 1. The foundation of God's invisible universe of all-knowing is light, undivided and unchanging light. The foundation of God's visible electric thought wave universe of form and motion is divided, or polarized light. Polarized light means that two opposed and unbalanced pressure conditions, which strongly resist their division, and multiply that resistance as the division increases, have been established by the extension of two poles from a dividing equator. For the two opposing electric pressures thus generated are compression and expansion. Compression is the result of the winding up of light into centripetal spiral vortices. This generates terrific heat which thrusts spirally outward in resistance to its opposing pressure. Heat thus generated radiates centrifugally. It expands that which has been compressed. Compression polarizes, expansion depolarizes. Each are then reversed and become the other in the following cycle. 5. Motion is thus two-way, two opposite ways exerted in two opposite directions by two opposing forces which pull away from each other with great universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 746. Intensity to become 2, then relax that intensity of opposition to become 1, for the purpose of repeating it to again become 2. 6. The constant effort of the two opposing electric forces to divide their one united, balanced condition into two opposing, unbalanced ones, followed by a sequential desire to seek rest from that effort in their oneness of balance, is the sole cause of motion. All motion is the result of interchange between the two opposing electric forces for the purpose of exchanging their conditions with each other. What we think of as visible light is not light at all. What we see and think of as light is but motion. The greater the intensity of motion, the greater the intensity of what our senses interpret as light. What we think of as dark is but an expansion of the intensity of motion. Our senses interpret short waves of high frequencies, compressed into small volume, as incandescent light, but when those short waves expand into long ones of low frequencies, and spread out into large volumes, our senses cease to vibrate to the measure of the compressed waves. As our senses lower their vibrations, so, likewise, our range of perception lowers. The one light of universal mind cannot be seen. It is the simulation of that one in the divided two of motion which we see. Our senses are vibrating waves of motion, and they can sense only vibrating waves of motion. 8. Motion is made use of by the Creator to manifest His idea. Idea cannot be seen, for it is never created. Idea is it cannot become. Idea is a quality of mind which cannot become physical quantities. Idea can only be extended as a simulation through two-way interchange of motion. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 747. Motion is made use of by the Creator to manifest His balance. Balance cannot be created. Balance is it cannot become. It can but be simulated by interchange between two unbalanced conditions. The supreme achievement of man is to so move that all of his reactions balance his actions with the precision in which the Creator keeps all of the stars in His heavens in balance with each other. 10. Motion is made use of by the Creator to manifest His energy. Energy likewise cannot be created, for energy is. It can only be simulated through two-way motion in opposite directions. Energy is a fulcrum which never moves but manifests itself by motion extended from its stillness through the two-way levers of gravitation which compresses, and radiation which expands that which has been compressed. These two are not energy. They but simulate energy by expressing it in motion. The entirety of this convincing universe of seeming reality is motion, controlled by intelligence and powered by desire. The realities of love, truth, balance, idea, inspiration, religion, invention, beauty, the arts, Roman, courage, character, ethics, loyalty, and all of the ennobling or debasing attributes of man's world are not in matter or motion at all. Give thought to this, all who think of their bodies as themselves. Matter consists of countless little and big whirlpools of two-way motion. One of these two directions winds up its two intertwining electric opposites into an incandescent fury of explosive resistance which become the suns of stellar, solar and atomic systems. That winding up of motion is what polarization is, that fury of resistance. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 748. To the winding up process is what compression is. That also is what gravitation is, and all of it is but one piston stroke of the electric heartbeat of the universe of matter, that polarizing piston stroke which generates the hot light of suns electrically records God's concentrative thinking in the forms of creation which simulate God's knowing. That polarizing piston stroke vitalizes bodies and makes them live and grow toward strength. That polarized light of suns repolarizes other bodies while the dark of space depolarizes them. But God's concentrative thinking is sequentially repeated in reverse. The intensity of generated resistance to such compression must relax. The wound-up whirlpools of motion which simulated one half of life must unwind into the cold dark of space to simulate the other half. Everything which appears must disappear. That opposite, relaxing piston stroke of God's decentrative thinking depolarizes, degenerates and devitalizes bodies and makes them seem to die and decay. It gives bodies back to the source of their borrowings. It radiates that which has been generated. In motion alone is the answer to all of the mysteries of matter. With one stroke of the piston we live, with the other we die. With the next stroke of it we are reborn to again die. And so it is that the cosmic cinema goes on forever. Bodies appear, disappear and reappear as a continuity forever and forever, but they never die. For they manifest eternal life, and life cannot die. But in bodies of matter there are none of the realities of the eternal life, love, truth and balance which matter only simulates. Why, then, set such store a universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 749 upon transient matter? Why worship motion which but simulates the intelligence of mind? This is but a thought universe, an electric record of the thinking of mind. The reality of you is not in your body. The only interest you should have in your body is the mental interest in building it into the kind of body you would like it to be to manifest you. You build your own body in the image of yourself. Whatever yourself is, your body will be. Whatever your thoughts are, your body will record. Whether balanced or unbalanced, good or bad, sickness or health, misery or supreme happiness. The eternal you is a glorious element, divine being. Do you know yourself as that? To the extent that you do know yourself as a glorious, transcendent being, your body will manifest that glory in every cell of it. It cannot help doing so. Electric recordings of thoughts and matter are automatic. It is law. It never errs. Forget your body, therefore your body will automatically be what your thoughts are. Build a beautiful, healthful, sound, vital body by thinking transcendent thoughts and putting those thoughts into action for the good of your neighbor and the world. Put mind first, body last. Live in an ecstatic mental reality and make your body conform to the balanced rhythms of ecstasy. Remember this, never for a moment forget it, that mind controls motion and desire of mind furnishes the power to motivate motion. The troubles of man arise from the fact that matter and motion control him. His inability to recognize the fact that the sensations caused by the motion of matter will dominate him, and lead him toward a selfish, greedy life of seeking unreal, universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy page 750. Possessions, whereas a mental existence will dominate those sensations to his everlasting glory. The conditions which exist in man's world of today make it seem a discouragingly long time before all men will learn the great lesson of life, that he who seeks possessions for himself will never find them until he begins to give of the abundance of possessions which he already has. No matter how little any man has to give, it will return to him multiplied unto his own glory. That is the law. When will mankind know that law? We shall now scientifically prove that the above statement is law, not altruistic idealism, nor sentimental nonsense, as the world of today would pronounce it. The mirrors and lenses of the cosmic cinema. Imagine yourself standing in the middle of a room whose walls, ceiling and floor are 6 mirrors. No matter what direction you look, you would see yourself mirrored in every one of those 6 mirrors, the 4 which are around you and the 2 which are above and below you. If you look carefully at all of the replicas of you which you see in those 6 mirrors, you will note that every image of you is in reverse. Your right side is left, your head is below your feet in the mirror below, and your feet are above your head in the mirror above. This most distinguishing characteristic of motion seems never to have been observed. If you were a true sphere of light, like a sun, that perfect cube of 6 mirrors of 0 curvature would be a wave field which measures the intensity of your desires and limits your powers of expression within them, beyond universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 751. Them you cannot extend, and what you extend to them comes back to you in kind. You will also see the mirrored images of yourself, which are in each of the 6 mirrors, again mirrored behind your own first image, as each mirror reflects itself and its image into series after series of mirrors which reach beyond your capacity into a mirrored infinity. That is what infinity is. Infinity is a mirrored extension from one imagined point in the universe to every other imagined point, and back again to that same point from every other imagined point. Infinity is 0 simultaneously multiplied and divided by 0, forever and forever. That is also what the brotherhood of man means. Every man in that cube-mirrored universe of 6 mirrors infinitely multiplied and divided by 0 is but one man. There are no others. Every creating thing in the universe is an infinite extension of every other creating thing. All are one, each is the other. If desire for an action takes place at any 0 point in that 6 mirrored universe, that same 0 point is reflected throughout the infinity of cube extensions of that limited little universe, which yours is. If you see only its limitations without being able to see its reflections which extend your limitations unto infinity, that 0 point of your desire is where you begin and end. That point is universal. You are universal. The self of you is there as universal self, your soul is there as universal soul. The other reflected 0 points are points of the beginning and ending of every thought and action which you give universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 752. Expression 2. They go forth from that point and come back to that same point to be recorded in that 0 of your soul which centers the universe of you. At that immeasurable and invisible point is the entire eternal record of you. What you are is the sum total of your desire. Your soul records your desire. Electrically, all of the reflected extensions of that point of view are termed harmonics. Those harmonics stand ready to repeat the record of yourself throughout the universe in waves, and when those waves of your thoughts and actions lie still, the record still awaits in the 0 of your beginning, and all of its extensions, throughout the infinity of imagined space. See Figure 96, page 714. Chemically, these 0 points of beginnings and endings are the inert gases of the elements, the patterned seed record from which the octave waves of the elements of matter appear. The inert gases are the seed from which patterned waves of the elements spring, as oak trees spring from the patterned inert gas which centers the acorn. The plane upon which the inert gases rotate is 90 degrees from the plane of carbon's equator, which is upon the wave's amplitude. See Figure 103. The inert gases are the electric records of all patterned bodies. They record all actions and motion which constitute events, but they do not record the morals, ethics, inspirations or the mental qualities of the genius in you. These God qualities are recorded in the soul which centers the physical record. Thought records are stored in the inert gases which become cell memory, instinct, and other attributes of body rebuilding. These records Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 753 carry over from body to body forever, and unfold true to the patterns of the negatives in space which they center. The whole pattern of an oak is not just in the inert gas which centers the acorn, nor is the whole of man in the seed of man. Every pattern reaches out into the wave field which contains the negative counterpart of its positive, visible body. If you will but remember that soul is desire in the seed, its motivating force, you will then comprehend how the inert gas acts as a nucleus, or center around which matter in motion accumulates to make a new body. This it could not do without the motivating force of desire, for nothing is, or becomes, without desire, and this is the answer to why bodies do not inherit the genius of their parents. They inherit only the bodies, for bodies are motion, the motion of thoughts is all that is recorded in matter. Intelligence cannot be transmitted, but bodies of highly intellectual people develop bodies which are more capable of becoming intellectuals than those who have not developed great brain capacity for storing thought records. Motion now begins. Instead of imagining yourself being at that center, you now are there in body, and your desire is to throw a ball. You now make a momentous discovery in relation to this cosmic projection machine in the center of which you are standing. You now discover that there are 9 light mirrors instead of 6, and you wonder why. You discover that the bringing of your objective self into its center brought Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 754 Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 755 The universal equilibrium is protected from being upset by wave equals field systems of 9 equators. Within these insulating fields polarization can express its opposition, but cannot pass beyond. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 756 Spras reach completion into true symmetrically balanced forms only at wave amplitudes where diagonals of 8 wave fields meet. For this reason spheres have within them the 8 octave tones which they project radially into the 8 separate octave wave tones of the sphere. Uic is father-mother of the other 3 divided pairs. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 757 With it also these 3 more equators which divided you into 3 dimensions, length, breadth and height, which were not there before you stepped into it, and your imagined image of yourself did not disclose that fact before. See figures 105 to 113. Figure 105 represents your imagined point in God's undivided equilibrium which you wish to extend to manifest you and desire in you, in the divided, 3-dimensional world of illusion. Figure 106 represents your extension of desire and height to the limits of your wave field. The 10 of figure 105 has now been extended to become 3 zeros. You now have a measure of height in your wave field beyond which you or any action of yours cannot pass, but a reversed image of you can seem to pass. That seeming seems so real to your senses that you do not doubt its reality or suspect its illusion. Figure 107 represents your extension of desire and length to become 3 zeros. You have now extended yourself 2-dimensionally such as a painting of you would be. Figure 108 represents your extension of desire in breadth to become 3 more zeros of rest between which you may divide your little universe into the action-reaction which you desire. The intensity of that desire has been measured out for you the moment you desired to perform the action. Observe very carefully the fact that there are 3 times 3 zeros now measured out for you in the light of equilibrium which you now wish to seemingly disturb by the action of throwing a ball. Each three is a manifestation of the Divine Trinity, and the total of 9 is as far as any expression universal law, natural science and philosophy. Page 758 of motion can go in the curved universe which your action is about to create. The 9 zeros measure the length, breadth and thickness of your desire to reach out from the point in space from which to express your desire to the 6 mirrors which bound your wave field. You now discover that the 3 inner mirrors which you had not noticed before you became objective, are the actual projectors of your desire, and the other 6 boundary mirrors are the cube screen upon which the projecting mirrors of your own little cosmic cinema throw the patterned motion picture of your desire. The cosmic cinema, therefore, consists of 3 projection mirrors of 0 curvature and 6 receiving mirrors upon which the patterned forms of creative desire are projected as a 3-dimensional screen of space. See figures 109, 110 and 111 for the 3 inner projection mirrors, and figures 112 and 113 for the cosmic cinema screen of 6 mirrors. You must thoroughly understand that mirrors and equators are the same thing. We use the 2 words because each has a different connotation. The word mirrors connotes reflection, and they reflect every happening on each side of them to the other side in reverse. We use the word equators in the sense that they equalize all polarized effects. The stillness of the universal equilibrium could not be divided into opposite conditions of motion unless equators are established between the 2, into which both disappear when depolarization restores balance between the 2. Radiation and gravitation are simulated by these mirrors. You cannot see the equators of space, but there are many you can see, and many you can know where to locate without being enabled to see. For example, universal law, natural science and philosophy. Page 759. You know where to locate the equator which divides the 2 opposite conditions which exist in the northern and southern hemispheres. The calm surface of water is an equator which you can see. When in equilibrium, its relation to gravity is the same at every point upon its surface. When polarization divides that equilibrium by curving gravity pressure to points above and below that calm surface, motion will continue until depolarization restores the normal stillness of an undivided equilibrium. You can see a violin string, but you may not realize that while it is at rest it is an equator between 2 possible unbalanced conditions. Just as the calm surface of the water is. When you produce sound by vibrating it, sound waves spring from it as waves of water spring from the calm lake, but there is no sound at all where that violin string equator is, just as there is LC, motion when waves of water reverse their polarization at their equator. You must thoroughly realize that the slightest motion of any kind arises an environment, and equators are immediately set up to keep the universal balance from being disturbed, which is impossible. The airplane on the ground is in equilibrium, at rest with its environment. The moment it moves, it polarizes that environment. 9 insulating equators are immediately formed in the measure of the intensity of motion. You are more familiar with the equator which is behind the plane, the one which is equidistant from the 2 poles which have been set up by motion, but equator planes of 0 curvature are set up all around the plane in all of the 6 directions which extend from its center. Universal law, natural science and philosophy. Page 760. A vital lesson of law and God's watchfulness over all creating things right here and now is the opportunity to get a deeper understanding of God's word as expressed in the divine Iliad message, which we again repeat: for behold, I am within all things, centering them, and I am without all things, controlling them. The 3 inner mirrors of God's light give to you the measure of your desire to extend your action. The 6 outer mirrors repeat your action in kind as the reaction to your action. They not only give back to you in kind that which you have given, but they repeat it unto the whole universe in kind. Whatever you do unto man you do unto yourself and all men. That is the law. Now prove it and understand it by beginning your action of throwing the ball, and take note of the amazing series of things which are happening. Let us number these happenings. The action begins 1. As you throw the ball away from you with your right arm toward the image of yourself in front of you, the other one is throwing the ball away from himself and back toward you with his left arm. You could not throw the ball without concentrating the power to do so toward a point of rest from which the ball starts its journey. The measure of your concentrated power is the measure of your concentrated desire. Concentration of power means to accumulate it to a point of stillness. That is the generative principle of nature, which is known as gravity. Gravity is the universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 761. Accumulation of power to radiate God's gift of love. The point of beginning where your ball comes to rest ready for the radiative action is a center of gravity. You have borrowed the power to hurl the ball from the center of gravity of the earth. You intend to extend Earth's gravity into the heavens. This you cannot do without Earth's permission. It freely lends you its power to radiate its gravity, for it demands repayment in equal measure after you have fulfilled your desire. Earth therefore extends to you a fulcrum from which you may extend your desire. Your body must become the lever which extends your desire into four-dimensional form. It is from that still fulcrum of borrowed gravity which you extend your action of giving of your abundant energy as a mechanical extension of the earth which your body is. 2. 10 times 10,000 pairs of opposite reflected extensions of you are doing the same thing, throwing the ball away from themselves toward their opposites, who are throwing it toward their opposites and away from themselves. Each one of each pair being the reverse of its opposite, and acting in reverse. You now know what the electric current is, and that should tell you what radar is. Likewise it explains radio and television. As you throw the ball with great force from the center, which is you, toward that extended image opposite you, its speed lessens until it reaches the measure of its height, which has been set for you as the measure of your desire. It comes to rest at that point for the purpose of repeating its flight in upon reverse. That rest point is one of the 6 equalizing mirrors which bound your wave field. The ball itself, as a physical mass, may pass on into the next universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 76. The wave field, as it does all through nature, but the motion of the ball, or the force which propelled it, cannot pass beyond any mirror plane of zero curvature. The force which you generated has been entirely radiated at that boundary plane. Its speed has decelerated to zero. All that you had to give has been given. 4. Your opposite mate has, likewise, expelled the ball from him with equally great force, which decelerates in speed as it radiates away from him. His ball also came to rest at the same point that your ball came to rest. His action of giving is also finished as yours has. Now comes the reaction. Radiation reverses to generation. 5. The action of your desire to give out from you has been fulfilled. Starting from rest, your desire has reached a point of rest. It must now return to a point of rest and re-give all that has been given. The ball which you have thrown to your 10,000 times 10,000 mates now begins to descend into their hands from you, and into your hands from them. Re-giving has begun its automatic reaction. The balancing opposite of radiation is gravitation. As the ball which your opposite image has thrown to you falls in your hands, it accelerates in speed because it is now approaching the inward direction of gravity. Gravity is multiplied potential, and all objects falling toward a center of gravity multiply their speed. The gravity borrowed from Earth to hurl the ball away from Earth is now being repaid by the ball as it falls to Earth. Every inch of falling adds to its potential just as every inch of rising subtracted from it. The power which you have given out from the abundance given you by Earth Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 763. For re-giving has returned to you. Multiply the energy given by you for creative expression degenerated and devitalized you in the giving, but regenerated you and revitalized you by the automatic, irrevocable giving. Giving depolarizes and re-giving repolarizes. Likewise, what it has done to you has been done to the whole universe. Whatever little universe you have created uplifts or lowers the level of the whole. What you have given returns in kind to bless or smite you and the whole world. A lesson CFIT. Every thought and action of anyone affects everyone. The unfolding of man to higher levels because of the balanced giving by the few is resisted by the downward drag of unbalanced G by the many. What is happening anywhere is also happening everywhere. Now for the next step, the curved universe of motion 6. As you throw the ball upward toward your opposite mate, who is on the other side, 01 the equad or of rest which bounds one side of your measured wave field, you make the disco /area that your ball is not being projected from you in a straight line. It gradually begins to curve. The same thing is happening to all of the other projected balls. They all curve in the same manner. Curvature also ceases at wave field boundary mirrors where motion ceases, and repeats its pattern of motion and reverses. Motion also begins again on the other sides of all dividing equators. Conclusion: we are now entering a new world of illusion, the illusion of curvature. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 764, which begins at the center of each wave field and ends at its boundary mirrors. That new world of spirals which wind and unwind, of spheres which oblate and divide their one focal center of gravity into two foci of gyroscopes which give orderly tones and octave form to every unfolding system, and all of this marvel and majesty of natural law will briefly be unfolded in the last series of lessons, which will climax with the revelation of the principle by means of which the cube mirror wave fields are formed and the 9 octave cycles of the elements of matter form within them to become the stage for the setting of the cosmic drama of creation, and for you and all mankind who are the actors in it. The great lesson you should learn from this is that the more you are enabled to give out from your own self, the more will be re-given to you. Giving does not lessen your substance, it multiplies it. Whatever nature radiates is given back to her. It gravitates back to repolarize the source of giving. When Earth gives vapors to the heavens multiply the vapors into rains and give them back to replenish Earth. If Earth withholds its giving of vapors, it will become a parched desert. Its reservoirs of waters which it retains for itself, will become emptied. The treasury of him WHO gives for the good of the people of Earth will always be filled to overflowing by the people of Earth to whom it is given, but he WHO locketh the door of his treasury for his OWNUs alone shall soon find it empty. This is law, unfailing and inexorable law, the universal law of love. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy by Walter Russell SCD and Lau Russell. Lesson number 44. The Walter Russell Foundation, Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. Copyrighted 1951 by Walter and Lau Russell. Answers to students' questions. We find it very surprising, as well as gratifying, to find that the questions which students are asking are becoming fewer as their knowledge increases, and are becoming more and more scientific and philosophical rather than metaphysical as they were in the beginning. As a matter of fact, many beginners among the students have frankly stated that the scientific parts were way over their heads and were difficult to understand. These same students now say the very opposite. Many very eagerly reach out for the scientific explanation of things and write us that they are becoming more scientifically minded, and more they automatically apply law and principle to the solution of problems. Over and over again we say, as we now again say, that the knowledge which is scientifically given in these lessons, and applied as workable philosophy, is sufficient unto itself for the solution of all problems. It is sufficient also as a basis for laying down a policy of action for today and the future. There is no need to go to others. You have the law and full knowledge of 765 Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 766. God's Ways. Month by month you have observed the interweaving of that golden thread of balance which has become a strong force in guiding your meditations. We treasure hearing of the wonderful results of strength in the carrying of your desire into meditation, with full knowledge that the way for fulfillment of your desire will come to you if you talk to God about it. When you ask advice from others, you subtract from your own transcendency. Transcendent beings do not thus subtract from themselves. For this reason we again say to you that we are pleased because you want to know more of God's ways, which you can only know by the direct scientific approach rather than the indirect metaphysical one. The following questions will illustrate the change in trend toward the more scientific approach. Question. In figures 41, 42, 43 and 44 you describe how positive and negative electricity pull apart by the increasing polarity of a growing tree. You use that fact to prove that opposites repel each other instead of attracting each other as science teaches. In figures 45, 46 and 47, however, the negative and positive poles seem to pull together as the tree decays. Would not that indicate the opposite charges attract each other half of each cycle and repel during the other half? Answer. No. In figures 45, 46 and 47 the devitalizing tree is losing its vitality, which means that it is losing its power to polarize. Its positive and negative poles are still pulling apart but with less power. Depolarization is taking place as each pole voids its power to pull apart. In the first half of Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 767, the cycle vitality increases, which means that its poles pull apart with greater vigor. In the second half of the cycle vitality decreases, which means that its poles lose their ability to pull apart from each other, but they still pull apart until their vitality is gone, and they have no power left in them to pull apart. At no period in the cycle do positive and negative polarity attract. Its whole purpose is to pull apart, for the purpose of polarity is to divide. Question. You sometimes speak of men who are unfolding cosmically as having extrasensory perception. That interests me greatly, for often when I feel tremendously inspired and forgetful of my body I seem to feel and know things that I do not ordinarily know. The research into extrasensory perception carried on at Duke University interests me very much because many of the things done there experimentally, which they cannot explain, happen to me constantly and I cannot explain them. One strange thing happens very often to me when my wife has been away over long and I wonder where she is and get worried about her absence. She will surely call me on the telephone and tell me where she is and why she was delayed, but stranger still, I will suddenly feel compelled to go to the door a minute or two before she arrives home. I feel sure that she is there, and it is most always true that she actually does arrive within a minute. I wish you would explain this scientifically, for I have no explanation for it whatsoever. The statement you made about one's sense perception increasing as his knowledge increases, and as mankind becomes more cosmic, leads me to believe that you know more about this phenomena than you care to tell us. I know that many others of your students will appreciate deeper knowledge upon this subject. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 768. Answer: sense perception means that one has an awareness of motion. Motion indicates its presence by means of vibrating waves. There is no other way for one to become aware of motion than by one's ability to sense wave vibrations, which really means to feel wave vibrations. You feel wave vibrations by seeing them with your eyes, hearing them with your ears, smelling them with your nose, tasting them with your tongue, or touching them with your body. All of these five senses are but one sense of feeling motion of some kind, somewhere. Now we get to the basis of sensing, for motion is all that one senses, and when motion begins in any kind of wave vibration, that motion can be sensed by some people more than others, some animals more than others, and some animals more than humans. Humans, for example, cannot hear the sounds of insects, which are loud sounds to some birds. Humans cannot smell as animals do. Their sense perception of hearing and smelling is not anywhere near as keen as that of a dog. Wave vibrations range from a trillionth, or more, of a centimeter in wavelength, or hundreds of thousands per second in time, to hundreds of feet or miles in length for one wave. The accompanying diagram will illustrate this principle. See Figure 116. The little white slit in this whole range of sense perception shows how small one's sense perception of seeing is. It is marked A. That small slit marks the range of wave vibrations which the eye can see, a small color range on either side of incandescent white light. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 769. Human visibility '. Limits. Ultraviolet K. Infrared. X-rays A-10 heat waves I. Short radio waves. Gamma raw S.A.R. Broadcasting cosmic rays, A. Spark discharges. Unknown. Radar. Long radio television. Waves. Figure 116. This diagram illustrates the restricted limits of human visibility when that range of sense perception by the means of sight ends. Down in the ultraviolet on the blue side, your body can feel what your eyes cannot see. It will become violently tanned by violet rays which are beyond your range of sight. Also, the photonegative can see more than you can. Faster than the ultraviolet are X-rays which can see through your body, and you can increase your range of sense perception by multiplying your visible range, electrically and photographically, so that you can see your own skeleton. By this means you enlarge your range of sense perception mechanically. Beyond X-rays are gamma and cosmic rays, which are thousands of times faster vibrations than X-rays. Naturally, they are far beyond man's range of sense perception, for life would be intolerable if the range were so great. Between the tremendous blue and red expanses of the wave octave is that narrow little range which limits man. When man's limit is reached on the red side, he can multiply his power to perceive wave vibrations by an instrument. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 770, called the bolometer. By means of it he can measure infrared variations which the eye cannot possibly see, To the eye those rays are black, yet the bat can actually see them as light, and so can many other animals. By applying the knowledge given you in lesson number 43, you know that the bat is not really seeing light, but is sensing motion. The Eastman Company produced a negative so sensitive to infrared rays, that when 40 or 50 people were photographed in a room so dark that one could not see his own hand, the photograph looked like any other photograph taken in the light. Every face was as fully recognizable, and the shadows cast by the light source were as sharp and clear as those produced in the upper range of sunlight sources. Again we say, the explanation is not in greater power of vision but greater sensitivity to the motion of short waves of high frequency, or vice versa. Farther still beyond the infrared there are the long radar waves which a bat can sense with its body as it flies and thus miss hitting objects in the dark which are beyond the range of its sight sensing. Man has been able to increase his sense range, mechanically, by multiplying the potential of these radio waves so that they can be detected by an electrical condenser. The machine which shortens these waves into man's range of hearing is an extension of his body which makes it possible for a ship to sense what is ahead in the dark, or fog, or under it, the way the bat does with his actual body. Beyond this radar range are other longer broadcasting and radio waves which also are very far beyond man's range of perception. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 771. What are these long radio waves? They are the sounds of your voice, for one example, which spread out through the universe in ever-lengthening waves at the speed of light, until they pass beyond the range of man's perception. 100 feet or so away from that sound of your voice, man has been enabled to condense those long waves which no man can hear into short ones which he can hear. By shortening them to the lengths and frequencies which come from you as sound waves, other people all over the globe can hear what you say as clearly as though they were in the same room with you. That is what condensing means. It is also what polarizing means. Dying sounds are being resurrected as living sounds. That is another mechanical way of extending the sense perception of humans. It may be possible, someday, to repolarize wave records of voices heard in the long past. The principle is the same, but electrical knowledge is still in its beginnings. Give thought to this with us for a moment. We all very thoughtlessly feel that our spoken words die soon after we have spoken them. We do not realize that the words as well as the thoughts which caused them are eternally recorded as negative images in reverse. These records live eternally through all the universe. Man has been enabled to condense them while they are closely circling the earth. When, however, they reach too far out in their spiral journey away from the earth, it may be that man can never mechanically rewind those long spirals into short enough ones for us to hear or see. It is possible, however, for cosmic conscious humans to see, hear and feel waves which electrical machines could never condense. The Whole Human Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 772. Race is gradually increasing its sense range into far reaches of the cosmos. The growth of God awareness in man is the measure of his increasing sense perception. Cosmic knowledge is the fulcrum which reaches out into its thought wave extensions to interpret the rhythms and the meaning of those thought waves with which space is so filled. As your cosmic awareness increases, your range of sense perception proportionately increases. Your increasing God awareness extends your sense perception into invisible thought waves by intensive decentration. You then bring these infinitely long thought waves into the greater frequencies of short waves by intensive concentration. This enables you to vision your thought body into form and motion of your imagining, which you might carry further by giving it a material body, or you may not. The power and the process are the same whether you do give it a material body or leave it unfinished as a mental image, a mental dream. If you do give your vision a material body, you pass it on to the culture of the future, which aids others to find that kingdom of heaven which all are seeking. If you do not do so, you have at least found more light on your own path, which cannot but help to illumine others to the extent in which you have lived it, thus uplifting others to the extent that they can see the light of your example extended to themselves. If you would know the great glory of extending your sense perception into the invisible and to the silences and the universal stillness of God's light, go deeply into communion with God as much and as often as you can. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy p. 773. In meditation with God you may explore the vast reaches of the thought wave universe where creation into the bodies of things begins. Go therefore and walk and talk with God. See Him. Know Him. Be Him. Be thou the fulcrum of thine own power. The fulcrum of power is knowledge of mind. Its extension into waves of motion is the thinking of mind. 1 hour spent with God in the depths of His forests could give you more of wealth than 1,000 shelves of books or mountains of gold. 1 hour spent alone with God could unfold you toward the higher strata of mind power intended for man, than whole libraries of books could give to you in centuries. We say to you, therefore, that when you can continuously walk and talk with God and work as one with Him, you can then know His masterfulness manifested in your works, and your mind will be one with His in the ecstasy of His rhythmic thinking. Question. It is difficult for me to readjust my old teachings to see such new thinking as yours, but I am gradually doing so. Just now I am struggling to reconstruct my traditional beliefs concerning polarity to your very different teachings, which are diametrically opposite to conventional textbook teachings. What puzzles me most is your statement that an anode or positive pole is also a cathode and a cathode or negative pole is also an anode. I quote the following from a textbook definition of polarity, which is contrary to your teachings. Polarity is the property possessed by certain bodies, by which they exert forces in opposite directions, with a positive pole power having power to attract and a negative pole having to repel. Will you clarify this for me, please? Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 774. Also please tell me if the textbooks are right in saying that the positive anode pole is the terminal by which an electric current enters a conductor on its way to the cathode. Answer to first question. The definition given for polarity is not only entirely incorrect in regard to natural law which we are teaching, but it is inconsistent with your old traditional teachings. For example, the words, exert forces in opposite directions, mean that they pull away from each other, which is truth. Your traditional textbook teachings tell you, however, that these two opposite expressions of polarity attract each other. How can these two forces attract each other and also pull away from each other? I wonder why you have not long ago thought this discrepancy out for yourself. You might as consistently say that a man can walk forward and backward at the same time. The definition then says that the positive pole has the power to attract and the negative pole has the power to repel. I wonder why you have never thought that one out for yourself while experimenting with a bar magnet and nails, or iron filings. You know that both ends will attract and equally. One end will pick up as much weight in iron filings, or as many nails as the other. Each one is equally gravitative and radiative. Likewise, both ends will repel and equally. But what is it they repel? Neither repels the iron filings, or the nails, for they fairly jump at either pole and cling so hard that you can feel their reluctance to leave by their resistance to being pulled away from either pole. What is it that they do repel? The positive pole repels the negative. It universal law, Natural Science and Bio.csci.phy page 775 pushes it away to the other end of each nail as far as it will go. For they are opposites, and opposites suppose they do not attract. And the negative pole does the same thing to the positive. In other words, both poles do exactly the same thing, but each is the reverse of the other. Each pole pulls inward to express the force of gravity, and each pole likewise thrusts outward to express the force of radiativity. Therefore, both are anodes and both are cathodes, for every light particle which approach either is positive, for it is contracting, and every light particle which leaves either is negative, for it is expanding. Polarity really means the division of a balanced condition such as the universal equilibrium into two equally unbalanced conditions which have to move to find their lost balance. Matter does not attract matter, nor does it repel motion. Exists solely because each of the two divided conditions are seeking balance in each other. There is another discrepancy in the textbook definition you quoted. That is the statement that polarity is the property possessed by certain bodies, etc. What your textbook means is that iron can be polarized to pick up iron, but all bodies of every kind are polarized. Every cell in your body, every planet and star in the heavens, and every particle of light in the universe has north and south poles located as far away from each other as they can get, and also as far from their mutual equators as they can get. Answer to second question: the electric current travels both ways through a wire, not just one way. The way you can reason this out for universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 776 yourself is as follows. Begin your reasoning process from the source of the current, such as an electric storage battery. This consists of two cells, one of which is plus equilibrium and the other is minus equilibrium. In other words, one is like a highly compressed gas which needs to explode outward to find its balance, the other is like a vacuum tube which needs to explode inward to find its balance. The moment you connect them with a wire, each seeks what it needs from the other one on the other side of their mutual equator. The current runs both ways to interchange. You call it an electric current if the equalization process is sent through a small gauge wire conduit, or a short circuit if you send it through a large wire. In a short circuit, the resistance to each other's passing causes a burst of flame. In a small gauge wire the resistance is not so great, so the short circuit takes a long time to equalize both cells into what is known as a dead battery. Question: in speaking of desire, should we reach the stillness and ask God to declare His will, or should we take our desire to Him? I do not feel certain whether I should ask God to make known His desires with me, or whether I should take my desire to Him. I am confused over the point of God's will and my will. Answer _ take your desire to God. Ask Him to show you the way to fulfill it, or to keep you from fulfilling it if it is not in line with your unfolding destiny. You are mind, the God mind. You are co-creator with God. Your desire is part of creation, your part. You are not a marionette dangling on a string. Do not differentiate between your will and God's will. They are universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy page 777 1. The universal will or soul from which desire springs for fulfillment. Become that one universal will. Ask of it as being God. Ask of it as being you place yourself where the law works with you to the fulfillment of your desire. Let me give you an example. Suppose you are now far along in the fulfillment of a desire. You have opened a business and are progressing steadily. You decide that you want to borrow $50,000 to push your business, and you ask God to fulfill your desire. You are working with the law when you become a part of the universal will, and the law will not let you have that $50,000. The bank returns your application with a polite no. You would be bitterly disappointed if you did not know that God is helping your business by keeping you from making that loan. Knowing your oneness with God, you are not disappointed. You then seek deeper understanding, and within a very short time you will be shown that you would have hurt, rather than have helped your business if you had taken on the debt. Your confusion as to God's will or yours as duty are having not yet arrived at that point where your oneness with God is absolute. God says, "See me, know me, be me." You can overcome that deficiency by getting more and more into the habit of working knowingly with God from moment to moment as one, not as two. Meditate also with Him as one, not as two. You will then have no further confusion regarding whether your will or God's will is to be done. When you are working knowingly with the law, your desires will be fulfilled with the precision in which the rose leaf unfolds or a planet keeps to its orbit. It is only when you cease being sensed body and universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 778, become knowing mind that the true vision of your destiny lies before you like an illumined path. You can follow that light and never stumble when you are that light. Question: the God mind being omnipotent and omnipresent, would not the thinking which springs from that mind be of the same quality, hence not illusion? By illusion do you mean not permanent and changing? Is there no objective universe? Would not the visible universe be as real as the mind which created it? Answer: the thoughts of mind are not mind. Think of your own thoughts. You might write a play of imaginative thoughts and ideas. They would be ever changing, but you would not be. They might include a murder and murderer without your becoming one. And the play you write has only the reality which your imagination has given it. And if you do not write the play, but only think it, there is nothing tangible to become objective for another one to see. He could see you, who thought it, but he could not see the thoughts. Thoughts of a person are not the person. Thoughts become objective when they are given form. The only form that can be given is the form of the motion which records the thoughts. The recording apparatus which gives form to those thoughts is an electric instrument which God uses to record His thoughts. This unit tells you about it. Its name is wave field. Its product is motion. The resultant forms of that motion are illusions, mirages, unrealities which simulate what they are not. We hope this will clarify your confusion. Question: say one lives to 70 years, then dies, takes 70 years of rest. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 779. Does one automatically begin the work period, or does one's desires have something to do with it? How do we get a physical body again? Do we fasten onto an unborn child? Answer: all effects of polarization are both cyclic and periodic. You have a daily cycle of living and a nightly cycle of dying. They balance those polarization for a day followed by depolarization for a night. You do not automatically awaken in the morning and fasten onto an unborn child. You awaken and repolarize your body for another day of living. You also have a life cycle of polarization and depolarization. When you awaken, you do not fasten onto another body, you fasten onto your own. You always have a body, the kind of a body you are making. You may discard it for another, but that other was regenerated from the pattern you made for it. You exist eternally, you think eternally, you are constantly recording your thinking in electric waves of matter which constitute your body. You do not record your thoughts in another person's body. You could not do this. Desire has much to do with the periodicity of your returning, just as a fireman must be awakened to attend to world's needs if the necessity arises, so can world desire affect your periodicity and call you back before your period of rest is normally over to help satisfy world needs. You are a part of world desire and world destiny as well as of your own personal one. As universal mind, you are subject to the call of universal mind. 0 Units 7 and 8 will amplify this question for you. Swan Enola, Waynesboro, Virginia. Treasured students, these lessons have been written in the hope that the new knowledge contained in them would materially help to unfold cosmic awareness in those who are desirous of greater cosmic consciousness and are ready for it. It is, therefore, extremely gratifying to have so many letters from our student friends which give great evidence of transcendent awareness far beyond their former normalcy. Letter after letter contains evidence of not only increased mental perception into the realms of the unknown and presumably unknowable, but also of increased range of sense perception, which comes as a natural corollary as mind awareness increases. We have answered one of these questions regarding extrasensory perception in lesson number 44, but we think you might all be more highly inspired to increase your mental perception through becoming more one with God if you could but realize that your sense perception would increase to extraordinary, and even amazingly, greater range. It seems strange, but it is true, that the more one can forget his body, the greater his body sense perception increases. The human race is unfolding in that direction. There will come a time when one's sense perception will reach so far that one can sense the thoughts of others for thousands of miles as clearly as one can now sense them by reading a cablegram. In this short space it is not possible for me to tell you at great length how I could sense all motion in all the universe during periods of my 39-day cosmic experience in 1921, but I can briefly tell it, and the chemical, astronomical and other charts I have made, and the new knowledge which I have given 780 to the world because of it, is indisputable proof of its truth. During that period I could sense all creation in the making. When I became wholly light of mind, I became the fulcrum from which all thought records were extended. I became a focal point in the stillness from which the universe of all cause and all effect was extended. In a flash it was all mine to know, as others in past history have been made to know in one instantaneous flash. But I was not permitted to be just that fulcrum of light for one instant, for there was a purpose back of that experience. That purpose was to interpret God's message to man of this age in the rhythms of his knowing, and to give man a new cosmogony upon which to build a new world in man's unfolding. That is why the severance from body to become mind alone for an instant of time took place, and why it was then extended into the universe of time and motion in order that I could give body forms to God's message into his KNO wing. During that period the invisible range of perception was wholly mine. I could perceive all motion. All of God's processes of creation were brought within the range of my sense perception. I could see light winding up into incandescent spheres and unwinding into the void from which they sprang. I could see the wave and every variation of its tonal building into octaves, and those octave waves which man cannot see or perceive, even with instruments, were as clear to my perception as those 5½ octaves which he can perceive. For days I felt the movements of ocean beds where mighty adjustments are taking place to keep the planet in balance, especially in the Pacific, where 781 mighty changes will take place someday not too far away in time. I strongly felt the nearness of Japan's plunge into deep seas. It took several days of effort to obliterate this sensing, which I made great effort to do because such things were not a part of my purpose, nor of my commanding. When, however, this extended sensing reached into the heavens, I held to them and rapidly made diagrams of the many things which must be written down and charted for man! !S new knowing. At one time I charted the whole solar system and all of the balanced relations of each planet to each other, and to its central sun. Before that 1921 experience I knew practically nothing about astronomy. The drawing I then made was upon tissue paper. I kept pasting new sections to it as I found I had not sufficient space for the orbits of outer planets and their relative positions with each other. Although I have lost this drawing, I had the evidence of the accuracy of the interplanetary positions and relations thus charted, because I employed an astronomer to mathematically check my drawings and give me the result of his findings. I shall preserve these answers for posterity and hope, someday, to also find the drawing which is, perhaps, in some forgotten portfolio. Each of the planets in that drawing were in their proper place in relation to each other and to the Sun, with some slight inaccuracies due to the difficulty of making accurate projection with D-squares and triangles upon tissue paper. It would take many pages to begin to cover the miracles which unfolded into commonplace naturalness during this 39-day period, so the above must suffice as briefly stated examples which do not even touch the edge of greater things which I have not yet told to man, nor perhaps can ever tell. 782 The lesson you can learn from this is that the more you can become the still fulcrum of cosmic knowing, the more you can extend the lever of your thinking from that fulcrum and make its meaning known to you. If what is herein written will help you to increase your own cosmic awareness for even a little, it is well worth having told you what heights you can reach in your journey toward human transcendency. Our loving thoughts to you always, especially now because of having reached the last lesson of this course. Sincerely yours, Walter Russell.